I'm Randy Steinfeldt, Randall Steinfeldt is my given name. I grew up in West Jordan, Utah, born and raised. I have 5 brothers and sisters, lived on a small little farm, and at age 14 my mother had open heart surgery, and it was very impressive. As a result of that, that's when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't really know what was all entailed, but I wanted to do it. And when I went to Weber State University from undergraduate, the realization of what it was that I needed to do was a little bit overwhelming at the time. And I decided I was going to go into medical technology. I was very shy. I didn't like talking, and so I knew that I'd have to present patients and stuff, and that made me really nervous, and I decided, this isn't gonna be it. But medical technology, I'm still in the medical field, and so everything will be the same, right? I went on a religious mission, and during that time, I went to Japan, and while in Japan, I'm teaching non-Christians about Jesus Christ, which was incredibly uncomfortable for somebody who didn't like talking to people. It was the greatest thing for a number of reasons, but one of them was that I realized you can do hard things, and the more that you do hard things, the more possible they become. So upon returning back from my mission, I changed my major to pre-med. Now, when you go to pre-med, it's like Cortez when he sunk the ships and forced the Spaniards to have to cross the Panama Isthmus. You have no other option, and because if you don't get into medical school, you basically are a failure, and no one wants to hire a failure. So upon doing that, I decided I better take a public speaking class. Not because I wanted to, but because I learned that if I do hard things, I can get through them. So, long story short, I get into medical school, and before that, I got married 1 year prior to getting into medical school, so I had a 1-year-old when we went to medical school. I was still about the same weight that I was when I got married. But during medical school, I stressed more, ate more, and sat a lot more. As a result of that, by the time I graduated medical school, I was pretty close to about 200 pounds, between 190 and 200. I was about 185 when I got married. I was a pretty skinny guy. Then I got into residency, and then I really learned how to eat and stress. And so by the time I graduated residency, I was right around 250 or so. At this time I had 3 children, and I was very inactive, and continued to eat after I started practicing medicine. And by the time I had decided to make a lifestyle change, I was about 280, 285, 42-inch pants, waist size. And it was, I was quite out of shape. It was during a continuing medical education meeting in Kauai that one of the speakers was Ken Cooper. Ken Cooper is the father of aerobics and has the Dallas Wellness Center in Dallas, Texas. And he was up there bouncing on stage. He had to be 25 years older than me, and I thought, man, this guy could kick my butt if he had a busted leg and the flu, and it hit me really hard right then. Something changed inside me that I said, I want to be that kind of grandpa. I don't want to be a grandpa that has diabetes, which my blood sugars were going up, my blood pressure was going up. I was, in retrospect, clinically depressed. Life had lost its zing and its zang. And so I changed. Now I didn't look any different, but mentally and in here I felt different. And the thing that Ken Cooper said that I first took to heart was 5 is fine, but 9 is divine, meaning the number of fruits and vegetables I should eat. So I started eating more fruits and vegetables. Well, it just so happens if you eat fresh fruits and vegetables, not processed, You got to eat a lot of them before you get very many calories, and they fill your belly up. So subsequently, I dropped the number of calories I was consuming, and I ended up losing quite a bit of weight. I went from about 180, 185 down to about 220, or not 185, 285 to about 225. And I felt a lot better, but I referred to myself as a smaller fat guy. If I looked in the mirror, I go, okay, yeah, you're not as big, but you don't look fit, and you don't feel fit. It would have been about the spring of 2002. So that means it was from 99 to 2002 that I changed my eating habits. This wasn't something that happened overnight. And in 2002, I picked up this book. It was Body for Life by Bill Phillips, and it was all the rage at the time. And my patients were talking about that. And they said, I don't know, I was doing it, but I couldn't continue with it because it was so crazy. The exercise took too much time, and the nutrition, I just couldn't eat that little of food. So I buy the book, and when I start reading it, I found out that the diet, the nutrition, was pretty much what I was doing. The exercise was totally different because I wasn't doing any. And they have these before and after pictures, and being a skeptic, I says, that's not real. There's no way that you can change that much in 3 months, because that was what the challenge was, a 12-week challenge. So I signed up for it. I said, I'm going to sign up for it. I'm going to go full throttle. I'm going to follow every suggestion and rule that he has in the book, and then I'm going to write him a letter and tell him what a liar he is. Well, instead of that happening, at the end of 3 months, I had gone from 225 pounds to about 210, so about another 15 pounds weight loss. But my waist went from a 42-inch pants is what I was wearing when I first started changing my eating habits, to a 40-inch pants. And then when I started exercising, I went from a 40-inch pants to a 35-inch pants in 3 months. So had a significant change in the way I looked. And that's when most people said, whoa, what happened? How did you lose all that weight? So I did that, and that was in 2002. And it was in 2005 that a young lady in my neighborhood approached me and said, hey, why don't we do a triathlon? I said, no, I'm doing my thing. I'm doing this Body for Life thing. It's working for me. And she kept pestering me. And so I signed up for my first triathlon in 2005. And while training for that, I thought, you know what, I better go out and do an open water swim. I swam in high school. I was a high school swimmer, not a good one, but I was okay. And so I thought swimming's going to be no problem. Well, swimming in open water is a little different than swimming in a pool. And so I went out there and I tried some swimming in open water, and it freaked me out. I had a little panic attack. And so as a result of that, I ended up doing 2 pool short triathlons to kind of get ready, and then I did my first open water triathlon in September 2005. And I would have to say I was pretty much hooked from the get-go. Even though my son watched me come in, and his first thing goes, wow, Dad, you looked horrible. He goes, you know, that girl passed you right at the end. I got passed by a lot of girls. He just didn't see the other ones that passed me. And so I did my first triathlon in 2005, and it was probably sometime in 2006, about a year later. Well, 2006 I know is when I did my first century ride, but I believe that was the time, right around that 2006 time period, that the thought of doing an Ironman first really came into my mind. My brother and I had talked about it when I first came back off my mission, because it had just started in 1978. I came off my mission in 83, so it was still relatively new. But I thought, I don't know, you know, if in order to do that, it's a 112-mile bike ride. I'll do a 100-miler and see what that's like. So I did this 100-mile bike ride, and I don't think I was the last person to finish, but I was really close to the last person to finish. And I was laying on my back. Most everyone was gone home. I'm laying on the grass and staring up at the dusky sky as it's getting dark, going, gosh, I've heard about this race in Utah called LoToJa, a 200-mile bike race. The thought of getting back on my bike and repeating what I just did, unthinkable. There's no way I could do that. And but I had done the 100 miles. Okay, okay. The next thing you got to do in a marathon or in a Ironman is a marathon, right? You got to do that. You can't finish. Wonder what it's like doing a marathon. So it was in 2007 I did my first marathon, the Ogden Marathon, and I finished it. Again, I was towards the back of the pack, but I finished it. And it was in 2008 that I signed up and did LoToJa for the first time, and totally blown away. You know, here I didn't think it was possible, and here I just rode 200 miles without stopping. So the idea of an Ironman was getting pretty solid in there. And the clincher was another person in my neighborhood, an older gentleman, comes up to me and says, you know, I've watched you lose all this weight, but it's a fad. Everybody does that. They lose weight and then they all gain it back. You're gonna get fat again, just like you were before. And I have to thank him because it ticked me off. And I told him, I says, you wanna bet? I said, I'll bet you $100 that I will not gain it back, and to prove it, when I'm 50, okay, I was about 38 in 1999. When I'm 50, which would be 2012, I will do an Ironman. And so that was my goal. Well, I continued to do triathlons and biking events, and it was in 2012 that I had a friend in 2011 get 6th place in LoToJa. Now in LoToJa, if you get to 5th place, you get to stand on the podium. He got beat out in a sprint right at the very end in 6th place, and I go, oh, that's not fair. Tell you what, I will do whatever I can. Let me back up just a little bit, because I got to give credit where credit's due. My wife, Nadine, had watched me do these LoToJa races, 2008, 9, 10, 11, and now it's coming 12, and she'd watched me, and she was a great support. She was always there. But I would get there, my friends would get there, and I'd be standing around kind of tapping my foot, waiting for them to get their nutrition. Sometimes they'd be laying on the ground stretching in these transition zones or these feed zones. And I'm sitting there going, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. And so in 2012, when I said I'm signing up for LoToJa again, she goes, I'm not going to be your support. And I go, well, why? She goes, because I'm tired of you not trying to win. And she goes, so I'm not going to do it unless you actually go out there and see what you can do. So instead of signing up for the fun ride, I signed up for the race in 2012. And so along with that, I had Brian, my friend, that I said, I will just tear myself apart. I will not quit pedaling until I can't pedal if I can still help you. Well, we went up that first mountain pass way faster than I thought was humanly possible. But by the time we got to the top, there was only, I think, 7 or 8 of us out of 50 that started. And, but I was cramping. We're 70 miles into a 200-mile bike race, and I've got, you know, softball-sized knots in the back of my thighs, and it's just, oh, it's terrible. We get to the bottom of the next climb, and same thing, just went up that hill faster than I should have. But I told Brian, you know, as long as I can. Well, by the time we got over the second hill, there were 6 of us. Okay, now all of a sudden it went from, I'm gonna do what I can for Brian, to all I have to do is beat one other dude, and I'm on that podium, okay? So we kept going, got over the 3rd mountain pass, and now it's flat for the next 100 miles, or relatively flat, and wind, which a big guy has better chance in the wind. So I'm sitting there going along, and I'm looking at these other guys, and they're looking a lot worse than I am. And when we get to the last 5 miles, Brian looks over at me and goes, I'm spent, dude. I can't do it. I want you to try and see if you can win. And it was so interesting because I had never even dreamt about winning LoToJa. And so as the whole time, that whole 5 miles, I'm riding along there going, I don't know how to sprint. I don't know how to win a race. I've never won a race before. And a friend of mine that had been in another group had gotten dropped by that group. So he was riding the side of me, and he'd raced several times. And he says, Randy, I'll tell you when to sprint. And that was so, I was so grateful for that because I didn't know what to do. And so as we get in there, 1,000 meters, 500 meters, and I'm chomping at the bit, you know, and Justin's sitting there saying, no, don't go. When we were about 300 meters or something out, and he says, "Go!" and he yells, and so I just exploded. And I'm throttling as hard as I can. I've got my chin down on the handlebar. I'm going as hard as I can, and I'm looking at that finish line, and no one's come around me yet. And that finish line is getting closer and closer, and I'm going, I'm going to win this sucker. And then I look between my legs, and there I see a shadow of a wheel stuck right on mine. And I go, no, there is no way. I am not going to let you deny me this. And I screamed out, no, you're not going to beat me. I jumped up out of the saddle again, and I crossed the finish line first. Turned around, and it's Brian. So we both got on the podium. It was a great day. So that was LoToJa in 2012. Since that time, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015, I was either first or second place in LoToJa for those years. 2016, I wanted to give a lot of my friends that had helped me win and supported me all this time, I wanted them to feel what it felt like to be on the podium. So I put together a relay team, and I said, if you guys will do what I ask you to do, we will win this thing, because I'm going to be the last leg, the anchor, and no one will deny me getting my friends on the podium. I just refuse to let that happen. And so that was the attitude I went into in 2016. Well, it was June 7th, 2016, that I was coming down a hill on a training ride, a hill that I'd come down many times, and missed the corner and went over the handlebar. And the next thing I remember, I'm waking up in an ambulance. I get to the hospital, and it's a little bit of a long story. I'm not going to give all the details, but it ended up that I had shattered my 7th thoracic vertebrae in so many pieces it was unrepairable. I mean, there weren't any parts to use to stick back together. And I'd broken the 2 spines above it and the 2 spines below it, and 4 ribs, and a shoulder, and a few things like that, and a thumb. And so for someone who had never had surgery in his life, I went to having 4 surgeries within that next 6 months, fixing backs and thumbs and shoulders and stuff. And yet I instantly, I'd have to ask my wife when it was. It was shortly after the accident. It was one of my first follow-up appointments with the back surgeon. I asked him, when can I get back on the bike? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, I've got a relay race in 90 days, and I've got people counting on me. And he goes, we'll talk about it. And so he said, I will not let you get on a regular road bike, but you can get on a recumbent bike. And so I put about 700 miles on a recumbent bike in a 10-foot by 10-foot shed, hooked to a trainer. And I must admit, even though it was very painful to get on the bike and off the bike while I was riding, was one of the only times during that time that I actually felt good. I felt normal. And it was just an incredible stress reliever, because otherwise there was a lot of stuff I couldn't do that I was used to doing. And at 90 days, I wasn't ready for LoToJa, so I didn't do the relay race. And but in, let's see, it would be November of 2016, so the same year that I broke my back, my dear wife gave me the permission and supported me as she drove behind me to do 1 century ride before the end of the year. I said, I have got to ride 100 miles just to know that this isn't going to be something that's going to hold me back. And I completed a 100-mile bike ride just to make sure that I could do it. In 2017, I didn't want to break my streak of every year since 2007 doing the Ogden Marathon, and my dad was turning 80 that year, and so he'd signed up for his retirement marathon, and which worked out perfect because I wasn't moving very fast, but I could keep up with an 80-year-old. And he actually took first place in his age group. I was about dead last in my age group, but I was dead first because I had completed another marathon. I started feeling a little better and signed up for LoToJa in April and was moving into a new age category. I was going to be racing Masters 55 plus, which they don't have an A and a B. When you get to 55, it's all A's. I was terrified because now I'm going to be racing against the former Cat 1 racers and stuff like that, particularly Mark Schaefer. If you grow up in Utah and you're my age, you know, Mark Schaefer, you say that word and it's like saying Mufasa. You know, it makes you shiver because he's just such an incredible cyclist, and he's in my age group, and I'm going to be racing against Mark Schaefer. And so I remember getting there. I felt like I was in pretty good shape, but I had no idea what was going to happen. And again, to make a all-day event in a 3-second thing, I beat Mark Schaefer in a sprint. And 15 months after my fracture, I win LoToJa. Now let's fast forward or kind of back up. In 2009, I started volunteering here at Kona as a physician in the medical tent. I got an email that says, hey, do you want to come to Kona and do a sports medicine and wellness CME? Associated with that, you can volunteer in the medical tent at the Ironman. And we will be we'll have a lottery for one spot that can do the qualify. We won't qualify, you get a spot to race in Kona. So in 2009 was the first year I did that. And 2012 is when I did my Ironman. I promised that guy I'd do it, and I did it, and I completed it, but not nearly fast enough to qualify for Kona. But in 2009 was the first time I had put my name in for a lottery spot here in Kona. And I remember that very distinctly because I was shaking like a leaf. You'd think I was getting up at the inaugural address of a president's inauguration, as scared as I was, because I thought, oh man, if they draw my name out, am I going to be able to do it? And I was almost relieved when my name wasn't drawn out. Well, they didn't draw it out 2009, 2000, and we go on. I volunteered every year, and in 2018, they drew Randall Steinfeldt out to be the representative for the medical group that would get to do the Ironman in Kona. And so a dream come true from something that started back when I was maybe 22, and then reignited back when I was about 40. And now that realization is coming true. And it's an incredible journey. So that's my story.
That's awesome. I think it's perfect. The questions that I had were to kind of prompt the story along, but I mean, you went right into it, which is awesome.
Did you get that $100?
Yeah, you know what? I never did. He would have paid me.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was. Whether it was payback enough. I don't even think I rubbed his nose in it. You know, he's passed away. He was an old guy. He's passed away. It doesn't matter. I got more out of it than $100 worth.
So they drew your name in 2018.
Yeah.
So you've had the last year.
Yeah.
To really train for this one. What's changed as opposed to training for maybe LoToJa or the Ironman?
Very good question. Yeah. So the for LoToJa, you've got to be able to accelerate really quick and power up hills because the race is over. I mean, it sounds terrible, but the race is over in 9 hours, which is still a long time. But it's not 12 or 13 or 14 hours. And so for the training for the Ironman here, I've been really careful to follow my coach. I hired a coach through Training Peaks, and to do my rest days. And one of the things, in order to keep my qualification, I needed to do at least a half Ironman in 2019. So I signed up for the St. George half. Well, the problem with that is I had signed up for the Ogden Marathon, of course. Okay, can't miss that. And I'd signed that up before I drew my name out. So as that came, those are only 2 weeks apart from each other. And so I emailed my coach and said, this is the problem. And I asked her, I said, so how should I race the Ogden Marathon? And her answer to me was, don't show up. And I go, well, that's not an option. I've done the Ogden Marathon since 2007. So we compromised, and I switched it to the half marathon and was able to do that. But it was actually, to give you guys a plug, in 2000, or not 2000, in 2019, but it was during that I ran into you guys at the booth at the 70.3 in St. George and tried your boots. And they went right along with what I needed. My worst problem I have with racing is number one, I have a tendency to overtrain. And so it was really good having a coach telling me to back off when I was supposed to. The other one is recovery. I just will not sleep because my legs are just antsy. I just can't hold them still, and I'm getting up and walking around in the middle of the night, stuff like that. And I wasn't sure that the Reboot would do that, but I was willing to take that chance, and I gotta say, I didn't have that problem this whole year. I could crank that up and squeeze the snot out of my legs, and they didn't want to bounce all night long, so it helped me sleep. So the main thing was to stay within myself, keep the training when I went hard, go really hard for brief periods of time, but do a lot of LSD, long, slow days. And during those days, you keep it slow, and then give time for recovery.